Hello everybody, this is Raspberry Barrel back at it again to finally finish reading the biography of Hemera, the Bright Knight. And please forgive me for how long this has taken. Time flies and life is just a crazy whirlpool of busyness and craziness. But we're back. We're going to finish this biography. So thank you all for your patience. And let's just get right into it. This biography belongs to MewniHistorian on DeviantArt. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background. Let's begin. In the first half of 874 BS, Hemera helped explore the lands of the Gaian jungle and the Widow Forest. While the Forest of Certain Death was left to the monsters, Hemera's party did do some exploring into it, taking notes of monsters in their natural environments, finding them interesting. When she returned for her 31st birthday, her brother Alexander announced he was getting married to a Lazalite girl named Zelina, someone he met while on a trip to see the developing Lazuli kingdom. They married that fall in the minor ceremony despite Hemera and Orbita wanting to throw him a large party. Though her new sister-in-law wasn't a royal, she was exceptional at magic and a perfect fit for her brother. They decided to stay in Farfilian to help with that end of the move to the new Lazuli kingdom. By summer of 872 BS, the Lazuli kingdom fully moved to the East Luciolis and was gradually starting to colonize West Luciolis' eastern coast. When fall came around, Hemera was waking up sick and was past due, so she did a new test with her chamber pot and wine, and that changed color meant she was pregnant. Well, it's not 100% certain, but the test is very reliable. But the other signs were there, so Hemera told her family, and by Oag, her belly began to show signs too, making a formal announcement. Wasn't too long before she received gifts for the unborn royal. Even Glosric knitted a pair of white socks, but Hemera burned them when he said it was made from his beard hair. Hemera's pregnancy was mild, though she was nearly took off a chef's head in the 6th Selene of her pregnancy when he questioned whether or not she should have another piece of cake. Hemera went into labor on Splenic 6 and gave birth the next night on the 7th. She gave birth to a baby girl with her pink eyes, her mother's eyes, and her father's blue hair. She named her daughter Nebula, meaning cloudy night, a name in reference to her orange double-sided crescent moon marks on her cheeks and the cloudy night she was born on. Nebula, her daughter, was absolutely loved. That was never into question. In fact, she revealed the softest parts of herself to her daughter. She barely let her baby out of her sight, even kept a watchful eye when the family held her. It's as if she discovered a whole new planet of worries. The next year, in 870 BS, her grandparents Selene and Azulon both passed, and it was a great sadness to the family. And while celebrating Independence Day, her sister-in-law, Zelina, announced her pregnancy, and her and Alexander agreed to name their child after one of their past rulers. In the late fall, Hemera met her niece, Selene. She took after her mother in looks, but had a yellow crescent on her cheek, and her daughter Nebula seemed to really like her. But before the year was over, Hemera's sister Orbita announced her pregnancy, and Hemera was ecstatic for her sister was having a child of her own. In the summer of 869 BS, Hemera heard news of the Johansen kingdom's newest princess, Hilda. She was happy to hear the other kingdom was flourishing. She also heard her cousin Stephen was expecting a child too. Hemera soon had an audience with King Flamius Phoenix. He came to her wanting to move his kingdom to the remaining lands of the West Luciolis, and Hemera was happy to help, as was her cousin Stephen, as they would be neighboring kingdoms. The king had 3 sons, Storm, Thunder, and Rain, and he took them on a trip to the West Luciolis, one Hemera orchestrated, to begin the start of the colonization process. She also took her daughter with her, and when they arrived just as the snow began to fall, and her daughter enjoyed playing in it, and also with Rain, who was her age. She thought the two of them were very cute together, but her main objective was to start a colonization process. By the summer of 868 BS, Hemera returned home to help with the transition of the Phoenix Kingdom to the West Luciolis. The lands they would leave behind would be given to the Butterfly Kingdom. This left much of the original land of Mewni, the land of the days of the first settlers, and the Butterfly Kingdom. The Phoenix Kingdom sat on the border of the Forest of Certain Death, and so the Butterfly Kingdom began infusing its soldiers into the mix to begin taking on the Phoenix Kingdom's forces so they can begin to move. Hemera and her baby Nebula. Despite Hemera both ruling a kingdom and helping with the Phoenix Kingdom's move, she always tended to her daughter's needs. Though after her daughter began solid/mushy foods, her husband Jab began to take on more roles that as a father filled him with joy. At home, her daughter really started to bond with her cousin Celine. After her daughter returned for her, she allowed Alexander to take her outside the castle, but made it perfectly clear that if anything happened to Nebula, she wasn't above crippling her own brother. In the summer of 867 BS, Hemera went to the Spiderbite Kingdom to tie a brief vacation and visit her in-laws, showing them their grandchild. They were passionately delighted to meet Nebula, and she was excited to meet her other family. On her way back to Butterfly Castle, she made a detour to see her sister Orbita, who was excited to see her. Even at only 2 years old, Hemera could see a lot of Orbita in her niece, Hilda, who had a bronze star on her cheek. Hemera deeply loved their family, and she wanted another child, and her and Jab had been trying to have a second, but didn't seem to take it yet. But she wouldn't give up. She was only 38, still had years left. One of her favorite things to do with her daughter was play hide and hunt, often dragging her brother and his daughter into it. They were one big happy family, and Hemera couldn't wait for it to grow. When her daughter turned 5, Hemera had the cooks bake a 5-layer cake, each one a different flavor. Her daughter ate half of it herself, and her cousins part of the rest. Her dad cracked a joke on how they inherited Cleo's sweet tooth. Cleo then said she hoped they didn't inherit his sense of humor, and that made Hemera and Alexander laugh. When her daughter got sick that summer with the flu, Hemera took a day off to take care of her, leaving the day's duties to Jab. The next year, Hemera turned 40, and she reflected on what she did in her life. She had a beautiful daughter and had done a lot before and after she became queen, and she was thankful she didn't have to deal with the problems the first queen did, with monsters and stuff. But she had a feeling that the warless reigns of her father, and her grandmother wouldn't continue long, but she hoped her daughter wouldn't have to deal with the harsh decisions those of the past had of making. In 854 BS, the Phoenix family came to visit the Butterfly Castle, and the King Flamius asked Hemera to see the progress of the new Phoenix Kingdom. She took her husband, but decided to leave her daughter behind, to leave her in the care of her grandparents. The night before she left, she walked into her daughter's room and kissed her, telling her she will be back in about a half a year, but she would bring back gifts. But Nebula only smiled and told her to hurry back. Hemera arrived in the new Phoenix Kingdom by fall, amazed at how much things progressed, arriving in Port Village and seeing many of her small villages along the way to the center of the continent of the Phoenix Palace. And her cousin Stephen was there with his son, Jasper, who came to see the home of his new neighboring kingdom. Hemera remembers the stories of the old, when the Mewmins were just a single city, Arcadia, which she visited a few times, but since then they've not just expanded, they've also colonized other continents. Their populations multiplied. She found a tapestry of ash, the first phoenix and his father Kai, and the first male mage. Flamius took pride in the works done, particularly of the showing of the first queen, Mo, and the 7 progenitors. After the Battle of Thamor, that one battle was their biggest victory, and one that shaped their history to the point. Hemera and Jab decided to stay and see the rest of the developing city while Stephen and Jasper left to go to their home on the Crown Island. In the winter of 863 BS, Hemera made a fantastic discovery. She was pregnant! Hemera was so excited. She waited so long to give Nebula a little brother or sister, but arrangements to return home in spring were delayed because of Hemera's morning sickness. But if she didn't miss her initial ship, it would have been taken out of a hurricane. Hemera saying goodbye to her daughter. Something about the hurricane that happened in Gravnock didn't feel right to Hemera, literally. The night it hit the shores, Hemera was staying in an inland village and could feel the winds, and they didn't feel natural. While her husband Jab didn't feel anything, there was another mage in the village who also felt off about the winds. But the end result was the coast was devastated, and it would take months before Hemera could sail off to the western coast of West Luciolis. Hemera had two cousins, Seleno and Pelorius, her uncle Planet's kids, and the two offered her a ride via the eastern coast in the Lazuli Kingdom, but Hemera said she'd wait, though she did have some letters for her daughter that they delivered. As she waited, Hemera's pregnancy went on, and she began showing and couldn't wait to meet her child. After her 42nd birthday, Hemera felt something off, and it wasn't the baby. She couldn't explain it. Call it a magical instinct or what, but Hemera felt something wasn't right. And in the middle of the night, when a fireball rained from the sky and hit the palace she was staying in, and they weren't natural fireballs, they were magic, dark magic. Hemera heard stories of her parents and grandparents fighting the mother of dark magic decades ago, but this felt worse. A shadow began to engulf in the city, and those caught up in it were enslaved by it. But with her magic, Hemera was able to hold it off till about half got out of the city, and it followed her. Hemera and the others she could save made their way to the Lazuli coast. Hopefully she can find help there. Hemera and the other mages used light and fire magic to fight off the shadows, and those enslaved. Not even the inhabited monsters were spared from the shadow's wrath. Hemera and the others managed to put some distance between them, but on the morning of Thirk 84th, Hemera went into labor. She tried to make it to the Lazuli coast to make it to the eastern Lazuli, but she had to lay down. A woman stayed behind to assist in the birth. By the morning of Thirk 85, Hemera gave birth to a daughter. She had black hair and Jab's yellow eyes, and had thin silver crescents on her cheeks. But before Hemera could decide on the name for her daughter, the shadow caught up with them. And it was led by a man who seemed to be one with the shadow. Hemera recognized him from before when he stabbed King Flamius. He made it to his wife in the Lazuli coast, and Hemera's only thought was her daughter and the others who hadn't made it yet. She looked into the eyes of her newborn and knew what she had to do. Hemera handed their daughter to Jab, telling him to run, but he wouldn't. He wouldn't leave his wife. But a moment later, a spear of darkness hit Jab, and it would have hit their daughter if he hadn't moved. Hemera's magic couldn't help her husband, so Hemera put up a light shield and placed their daughter inside and the magic wand. She used blood from the birth and her husband's injury to use a powerful spell, one that would send their daughter away to Nebula. It pained Hemera to leave her newborn, but she needed to send her baby away to save her, and sent her to Nebula. She cried, and the shadow broke through the light wall, and when she saw the life drained from her husband, locked eyes, when it happened. Hemera was so full of rage she went supernova, vaporizing the shadow, and created a large firewall that would protect those who hadn't yet escaped. Hemera was exhausted both physically and magically, and when she saw the man who caused this walk towards her with a sword, she took out her boot knife and stabbed herself, not giving him the satisfaction. So tragically ends the life of Queen Hemera, 5th Queen of Mewni. She was the 4th Butterfly Queen, the Bright Night, the Lost Light. She was known by many, but most importantly, Mother. Hemera was the first to die while wearing the crown, and thus her 8-year-old daughter Nebula, her successor, was queen, and Hemera would be the youngest to die for centuries. Her and Jab's bodies were recovered and buried in the crypt with her grandparents, but all are grateful for the gifts of life and knowledge Hemera gave during her reign till the very end. Hemera saving her newborn daughter. And that was the biography of Hemera, the Bright Knight, by MewniHistorian on DeviantArt. Please go check out the rest of MewniHistorian's wonderful art and stories. It takes me a while to make these videos. As you can see, it's basically taken me like half a year just to make this one set of biographies. So go to his DeviantArt and check out his stories. And thank you, MewniHistorian, for allowing us to read these. And again, I'm sorry it's taken so long. I hope you all enjoyed this biography. Now we are finally done, and it's time to move on to the next one. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye!